Now let's get to know how to involve these blossoms into an item woven around poles, for example a jewel box. I've already prepared a workpiece. Here I've got brick red tubes, and these ones are of lighter color of straw. Here I'd like to create a few rows. I hope I'll manage to make 3 rows of such flowers. How to calculate? Well, first of all, if you've decided to involve flowers into your item from the very beginning, it is much easier. But if you've made up your mind to add flowers all of a sudden in the process of weaving, I'll share a few tips on how to cope with the situation as well. As you already know, for creating each flower we need 3 tubes. But since they are united, each flower requires 2 individual tubes, but the third one will be common for all the blossoms. Let's call the common tube working. So, 2 tubes. The next point. It can happen that you've placed your poles either too close or too far from each other. If you place them too far, it can result in an open work. I'll tell you why it happens and how to deal with an open work a bit later. Or if you place the poles too close, your blossoms will be too big for your item. So, what I do to avoid such failures? In order to calculate everything, I make at least 2 blossoms beforehand and unite them. Let's measure them. 2 united flowers are about 4 centimeters, 1.5 inch. Taking into account a short interval between them, it can either be there or not. So the size is approximate. But if I don't keep in line with this size, my pattern will be either too loose or too dense, and there won't be enough space to fit in the flowers. As a result, an item will be clumsy looking. So each flower requires 2 centimeters of space and 2 tubes. In my case, each flower is 2 centimeters in diameter. Well, it depends on tube thickness. In your case, the diameter can be bigger or smaller. If you'd like to get an open work result, you can place blossoms further from each other. It's up to you. So let me repeat. Each flower requires 2 tubes, excluding a working one, and each flower is 2 centimeters wide. Which means the intervals between my poles have to be 2 centimeters. I've taken it into account while inserting the poles. So please take a look. There's about 2 centimeters between my poles. It means I've managed to keep up with the required interval. Now how to deal with this part? I've considered 2 options. In my case, I've glued the doubled poles to the bottom. Well, I don't need a base anymore. It would be too inconvenient to weave flowers around a base. So, as an option, instead of inserting and gluing 2 poles at a time, you can take 1 tube and the second one, weave a flower like this, and then just stick a tail carefully afterwards. As for me, I prefer the first option. Insert doubled poles at once. Well, you can start from any point you like. It doesn't matter at all, because we weave in circle. So I take 2 neighboring poles, these ones for example. Let's press and soften them to make them easy to lead through. At the same time, we make sure they are strong enough. Surely I did apply glue in this case. And start weaving. It's rather difficult too. Here's a crossing, here's a tube. It twists like this. In the previous examples we had this tail loose. This time we have to make a zigzag like that. the second tube, place it, lead through the coil. Here it is, got it. Now let's take a working tube. Soften it carefully. Lead it through from beneath in such a way as to leave a very short tail here. I'll show you where to involve it afterwards. Here it is. Lead a working tube around the structure like this. Let me show you once again. Place it next to the tail, and now lead it behind two tubes. Right here. Now please have a look at the distance my flower is situated. Compare, please. This means I have to pull all the structure tight carefully. Here is a tube, here is continuation, and here's where it goes out. So I pull it tight this way, down and up. Here's my next tube. It is where it starts. Here it continues. You see, I've already pulled it down. Here it continues, so I pull it here and there. Now pull these tails tight. Surely it is much slower than weaving a 3-tube rope, for example. The flower is clearly visible already. Now let's tighten it and pull it down once again. So I'm pulling these tubes, which pull the blossom down. Here's my tube. In order to track the tube, you have to remember that the opposite tails of the same tube are always parallel to each other. Here's my tube. I put it tight here. It is where it continues. So the blossom is almost where it is supposed to be already. Well, actually you can leave it where it is, no problem if there is a small gap. Moreover, in case you weave blossoms without doubled poles, unlike me, you do need this gap for inserting and gluing a tail. So the first blossom is ready. Check and tighten everything carefully once again. What do we do next? Take the working tube as well as these two tubes aside to avoid interfering. Take the next two tubes. Here they are. You see, my blossoms will be located next to each other. Continue working. Weave the second blossom. I press all the poles toward the center to avoid interfering. Look, I take one pole left from the previous pair of poles and the first one from the next pair of poles, and repeat all the same actions. You can do it tighter at once, but I don't like weaving it too tight, because it's too hard to lead tubes through in this case. I prefer pulling the blossoms tight afterwards. I've made a stitch this way. Lead the front tube here through the loop. I've shown you the process multiple times already. Now to connect the blossoms I've already shown you as well. Here's my working tube. Now I just lead it downward and take it out from beneath. Pull the blossom closer to it. Hark the blossom with a working tube. I have to lead it here. If you cannot pull it through this way, you can help yourself with a knitting needle. Or you can pull it out from beneath, this way. Here it is, and now lead it behind our two tubes. Right here. Well, sure, if you roll the tubes round very thin knitting needles, it will be much more difficult. Here is the second blossom. Let's pull everything tight carefully. How to tell which pole to pull in order to tighten this loop? You have to find the one parallel to it. Here it is. So I grab it with a knitting needle and pull it tight. And you have to tighten each loop in the same way. If I pull this tube, I'll tighten that loop. You can pull this coil at first and then that one. Here it tightens. Now I see this loop is too loose, so let's pull it a bit tighter. You can help yourself with your fingers, pull it tight, and this loop again. That's all. Well, I see this loop is still a bit loose. So 2 flowers are ready. Well, let's measure, just in case. What have we got? We have to get 4 centimeters. You see, here they are, 4 centimeters from edge to edge. Continue. You can pull the rest of the poles behind to avoid interfering. Take the next 2 poles and create the next blossom in the same very way.